bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm here with HockeyRaiders.com. We've got our regular cast with us today. We're going to have a good show because the Oilers are 5-0. Yay! Brian Swane is with us. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing good. Good to have the whole gang here again.
Wasn't it you last week that said, hey, by the time we do this show, we have no idea where the Oilers will be at? Wasn't it you that said that? It's like everything changes when we plan this thing, right?
But remember, like when we were on the show too, Mike Smith was healthy at that point, I believe, right? So, I mean, there was the ensuing chaos, but it hasn't been all bad chaos, right? I mean, they haven't lost yet, so...
Yeah, no, it's been good. It's been good. I'm happy that they're 5-0. I'm not complaining about the fact that they're 5-0.
Neither am I.
Julian Mongillo is with us as well. Julian, how are you?
It could be better if at least would learn how to win a game over here, but at least the Oilers are doing good, which is good. We kind of almost jinxed them against that Arizona game. We were watching it and they ended up squeaking a win out there. But you know what? 5-0 is 5-0.
Well, they've made every game dramatic. I'll give them that. 5-0 without a single one that you're like, yeah, the last one, I suppose it kind of looked like the Vegas game of all the games, right? Was kind of the one where you seem to have it in hand, and that was a pretty good game. And Colton Pankiw is with us as well. Colton, how are you?
I'm good, Jim. Like everyone else has said, 5-0, and I think I'll make a prediction and say too that they'll be the last team to lose the first game this year.
Oh wow!
Oh, what's the other team? Florida,
Carolina.
Florida 6-0, right?
Yeah, Carolina, St. Louis too.
Yeah, well, there's a handful of them. Who would have thought, right, at this point in the season that there'd be teams that are undefeated? And the real kicker is the teams that have been really bad, right? It's not so much that there's some really good teams, because the teams that have been pretty good, most of us kind of figured they'd be decent. And I think the Oilers were in that group. But the teams that have stunk up the joint completely are the ones that we kind of figured, like, who'd have thought Vegas would be at the bottom of the Pacific Division, right? Like, no way, right? And as Julian said, Toronto has not looked good at all. There's a handful of other teams that you're just sort of Colorado, bottom of the division, right? Like, who'd have figured? So quite a time. So yeah, let's dig into this a little bit. We'll talk a few different topics tonight, but let's talk a little bit about the 5-0 start. Brian, I'll start with you. What's the biggest takeaway here? Like, what is the one thing that you've sort of taken from these 5 games and said, this has been really, really good?
I think the confidence the team carries themselves with, they're outside of that, like Arizona was a 5-1 win, but the other ones they had to come back against Vegas and Anaheim multiple times in both games. They had to come back. The Calgary and Vancouver wins both got, Vancouver went to a shootout. Calgary, they had to hold on late. They seem to just know that they can, if they get themselves in a hole, there's no panic, and they just come back, and they've been getting timely goals. They've been getting timely goals from their players who are the ones that are expected to deliver in clutch situations. And I say it all the time, and I don't want to jinx this, but there's so much of this that reminds me of like those 80s Oilers, just like the confidence that they believe, like, okay, we'll spot you 2 goals. We're going to go out and score 3 now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've definitely got a swagger about them, and not like a cocky swagger. It's not like a, hey,
no, it's a quiet, quiet confidence is probably how you can phrase it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they finally look like they know they should be where they are, and they should be better, and they're going to be better. It's not so much as like, I don't mean to beat up on Toronto, Julian, but there's this stuff everybody's like, Toronto should be really good. They have all these stars. They're really top heavy. They should be better than this, but there's this doubt that seems to creep in with that team. Mm-hmm. The doubt's gone in Edmonton. It looks like, right? Like
we've seen that doubt here in the past, to be fair, too, right? Yeah.
And that's maybe what you're talking about, right? Like before last year, I thought they felt like they could win a lot of these games and hold teams off, but this year they just really feel like they should win. They believe every game. They won't win every game, but they feel like they should, right? Like they should be in all of these. Julian, what about you? Anything big takeaways from the 5-0 start?
Well, that demeanor that we talked about it before, and that's just like the cool calmness that they've had, and they've been unwavering depending on the situation they've been in. So that's always good to see. But for me, it's been the play of their goaltending, specifically Koskinen. One of the biggest question marks turns into, someone that they can rely on. Like, they have no fear throwing him in the net now. And I don't even think the fans have fear when they see him, that he's in the starter's crease. It just some sort of calmness to say, okay, we can trust this guy now. And I think that comes with, him being able to see his family this year as opposed to last year, and, having a little bit more of that personal feel of being at home. So that's always been good. I'm sure the fans also help the situation. So, but the goaltending for me is just by far stood out. And, maybe, who knows, maybe Koskinen is the one they lean on even when Smith comes back, and they can just split the games. And Skinner hasn't even got in there yet, but we've seen him in the preseason do well, but goaltending doesn't seem to be an issue. And that was the biggest question mark coming into the season.
Well, Smith was practicing with the team today as we record this, and Koskinen still, I think, gets the nod tomorrow. As people watch this, it'll be tonight. Were you surprised, Julian, that he went back-to-back? Like, we talked about this last week, that Koskinen maybe would get back-to-back games. I don't know if that's the point, because I think Brian said that Mike Smith was still kind of healthy, but nobody sort of figured that Koskinen would go back-to-back. He did go back-to-back. He looked really good back-to-back. Were you surprised by that?
I was a little bit surprised, but it doesn't like, I'm not shocked by it, because Tippett, wants to lean on that one guy for the time being, and eventually, and they'll be able to share the crease later on. So it's about getting those wins while you can. And we've seen him do that last year when Smith went down, and how I think Koskinen started those 13 consecutive games or whatever it was for that stretch that he was missing. So we've seen him do it before. So it's not overly surprising that he went and turned to him again. And especially with how good he's been, how could you not?
So Brian's got the confident, the silent swagger, the quiet confidence. Julian's got the goaltending. Has looked really good. Colton, what's your big takeaway from the 5-0 start?
Yeah, it's tough going third. Get everything going.
I'll get over right down the middle, like a little bit of both.
Yeah, no, I'll say, like, I think some of the new additions, especially up front, like Warren Fogel's a guy that I didn't really know a lot about before he got traded here. And I think he's looked really good. And then Hyman's looked even better than I was expecting. He's been unbelievable. So I think, just like Brian said, I think the biggest takeaway is just that confidence. I remember years ago, it was like, if they get up a goal in a game, it was just, you're just waiting for them to lose it. And now it's the other way around.
Now it's like you're waiting for them to come back, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If they trail by 1 or 2, it's kind of just, okay, like, can you just wait for McDavid, Draisaitl, whoever to go out there and score one and put them back in it? So it's just a whole new dynamic. And yeah, I think the big thing for me would be the new additions right now. Yeah,
Fogel's look fantastic. I mean, he might wind up being the guy at the end of the year that we don't talk about much, but we're like, man, he was really good. Like the whole season, just consistently strong, puts in the effort. He's made Cassian a better player, and I think Cassian's look pretty good. Like, I just really like that line between Derek Ryan, Warren Foegele, and Zach Cassian. I think you're bang on. I think that's a good one. For me, I just love the fact, and I don't know, I haven't looked lately today because, the Oilers haven't played in like 3 games, 4 days, whatever it is, because they had their little team building road trip in Las Vegas and all the fun stuff that they were doing. Nice. So but they're still, like, there's a bunch of them on the leaderboard, right? You got McDavid, who's got 13 points in 6 games. You got Draisaitl's up there, Puljujärvi's up there, Zach Hyman's up there. You got a lot of guys on this team who, as Brian said, the people you expected to be good have been very good, and not just like really good, like really good. You know what I mean? And that's a really positive sign, because everything else that the rest of the team gives you is just gravy, right? Like, if you can get that third line to chip in one every once in a while, you can get the fourth line to actually, have a shift where they get to play a little bit and let everybody else sort of rest. The power play, what can you say, right? The power play been fantastic. What are they, just over 50% or just under 50% at this point? Like, who knows where they're going to finish, but it's been pretty awesome. All right, Colin, I'm going to let you go first since you went third last time. Everybody knows going last, it sucks. You can go first. Evan Bouchard, let's talk a little bit about him. He's one of the guys we did not mention in this 5-0 start, but he might be the one guy that we probably should have mentioned unanimously, because he's been really, really good. How surprised are you, one, by how quickly he has sort of grabbed that role, maybe even replaced Tyson Barrie a little bit? And 2, are you surprised at all?
I am surprised that he's gotten the amount of looks that he has early on, just given what happened last year. Like, there's been a few different times already that he's been out with like a minute left down, or they're up a goal and he's up there like defending. So I know his big thing was always kind of coming into the league, like being an offensive defenseman, but Tippett's really comfortable using him in all situations right now, it seems like. So I think that's huge for him after everything last year. Like he could barely get any playing time, and now he's basically, you can roll him out there whenever. So I think that's been the big thing.
Julian, what about this whole Tyson Barrie and Evan Bouchard dynamic? So we've got Tyson Barrie, who I don't think has lost the first line spot at all, not yet. But Evan Bouchard has just looked so good that it's kind of hard to go, you know what? Like, we really should reward this kid. I don't think it's Tyson. He's had a couple hiccup moments, Tyson Barrie has, but we know that's about what Tyson Barrie does every once in a while. And you've seen him in Toronto, so you know this too. Yeah. He gives you what he gives you, which is a lot of offensive points. He's good on the power play, but he's not terrible defensively. He's just not wonderful defensively. But Evan Bouchard has been really good. Do you think this is a situation at this point in the season where Evan Bouchard is looked at now as the guy and it's his spot to lose, or is it still Tyson Barrie's and every once in a while Bouchard's going to get a look?
It's tough. I think they're at the point where it's going to be Barrie still to lose. He's on his way to be losing it right now. So it's going to be Bouchard's by the end of the year. I think that was one of our bold predictions. I'm not sure if it might have been mine or not, but I just think that he's been really good, and the way he's played defensively and developed that defensive game in the minors. And I think it kind of shows how they've taken their time with him. They knew the offensive stuff was always going to be there, and it's easy for, players to just revert back to their offensive styles, but learning that defensive game and honing that in the minors and then bringing that to the NHL level is something that is going to be the hardest thing for defensemen usually to do. So to see him come that far and gain Tippett's trust so early that he's putting him in those big situations, I think it's great. I love him beside Nurse. I think that's a great tandem for the future. I would run that. And I actually like Barrie down in the third spot. And if Bouchard's going to show the way he's showing, I would leave it like that. And I think that he's going to keep getting those looks. I like that they're mixing in those different looks, sometimes Nurse, sometimes Barrie, sometimes Bouchard. And I would just keep doing that because it just changes. It keeps everything fresh and it keeps everybody, in a offensive state of mind. Everybody's active in all facets of the game. Not only, I'm only here to stop goals. I'm only here to score goals or score points. Everybody's involved. And I just think that keeps the whole team, dynamic, flowing better.
Well, and it's super helpful, like when you have a lack of 5-on-5 flow, which we've seen in these first 5 games, right? Like when you've got Bouchard killing penalties and you've got Tyson Barrie working the power play, and then you've got like 4 penalties one way, 4 penalties the other, and you can't really keep a consistent 5-on-5 going, and some guys don't penalty kill and some guys only work the power. Then having the options, right, to say, okay, I can put Bouchard on the penalty kill, or I can put him on the power play. I could put Barrie on the power play this time. If I have to, I can put Nurse there. Just having those options and it still being a deadly power play, that's really, really cool. Brian, what is the biggest, I don't want to say asterisk, like the biggest star, the smiley face that you would put on the Evan Bouchard chart of, is it the offense? Is it the penalty killing? Is it the minutes he's playing? What's the big standout for you in the way that he's played so far this season?
Penalty killing. I'm really pleasantly surprised, but I wasn't expecting him to get this. He's been used, I think, as frequently as just about any other defenseman in a couple games on the PK for the Oilers this year. And he's done very well in that role. So he's obviously going to continue to be put out there. I mean, he's always kind of been advertised as an offensive defenseman. He's a guy we had penciled in to play a large role moving forward on the power play. But I never expected him to be one of the most reliable guys on the PK, and he's done that so far. So he's he might be a more well-rounded defenseman already at this stage in his career than I had originally appreciated.
Yeah, he's been fantastic. I mean, it's really hard. It's so early still, right? So we have to kind of put the reins on a little bit, but I'm also confident enough to know that maybe we don't, you know what I mean? Like we don't want to put too much pressure on this kid too early, because this really is going to be his first full season. And I'm assuming he'll play all year, assuming he's healthy, right?
And the other thing too, what I find is really amazing is that he's doing this. He's made this great leap and shown this progress, having sat for 3/4 of last season. He never got to play any time. He never got any reps in the minors, right?
Did you guys see the press conference today that Tippett had? I don't know if you guys watched it, but he made note of Bouchard not wanting to go back to the minors. I want to be up here. And if that means I'm not playing games, I want to be with the team, practicing with the team, because that's what's best for my development at this stage of the game. right?
Yeah.
So that speaks volumes to,
Yeah.
where he was at in his development last year. And I think Tippett seeing that has just given them that trust and that thing, okay, like this guy's here and he means business, and Tippett, he's in his good books now, and I think he's going to keep rolling with them.
Well, and it makes sense too that everybody else last year, fans, I mean, when I say everybody else, was sort of freaking out about Bouchard not playing, but Bouchard was totally calm and collected. He didn't care. Like, he probably cared. He probably wanted to play, but you never saw him frown. You never saw him complain. You never saw him, like, he seemed very, very content with what was going on. And that could probably explain why, right? He's like, no, I've chose to be here. Even if I'm not going to play, this is where I want to be. Makes total sense to me. All right, let's change the gears a little bit. Julian, I'll start with you, then I'll run over to Colton. We are talking about McDavid, how wonderful he's been. We always talk about McDavid and how wonderful he's been. But the question now, and it's early, and nobody wants to use the phrase he's on pace for because it's way too soon to do that. But can Connor McDavid do 2 points a game? Can he get 164? It's rounded up to 165. Can he get 165 points on the season? Julian, I'll start with you.
I'm going to go with yes, because he put me in doubt last year about the 100-point mark in those 56 games, and he made everybody eat those words. So sky's the limit to me. I'm just gonna go ahead and say he can do it, because why couldn't he? You know what I mean? With Draisaitl and all those talented players on there, I'm just gonna say he's gonna do it.
Colton, can he do it? And if so, how much does he break it by?
I think I was the last one on this podcast, like when we were doing this last season, to say that he would. I was pretty hesitant about the 100-point mark last year.
Yeah, you were all glasses half empty.
Yeah,
I know, and I think I'll stay that way. 165 is just such a crazy, like, when we were going in, or when they were going into the season, I was thinking, like, is 150 possible? And I think 150 is. I think 165 is crazy, and hopefully he proves me wrong again. But I don't know. That's a lot. Okay,
well, let me ask you this question, and that's fair. But let me ask you this: what sounded weirder to you at the start of the year? 165 in 82 games, or 156? What would have been stranger when you think about it like that?
Oh man,
because he hit that without a problem.
It's so tough now that he did it. I think I kind of almost would have laughed at both at the time.
It's okay. We'll have to bring Colton back around to it, I guess. I don't know how Brian's stat is.
I still think the 165 and 82. I just think like that's.
I know it's crazy to think,
but it just sounds so crazy.
Well, you know what the real kicker is, and we're talking about McDavid like this. He might not be the only one that gets close. Like the way that Draisaitl's on there, and he's like, because he's playing with McDavid, he's like the silent, deadly assassin point getter, right? Like, he's so good, and he gets 4 points, and you're like, you got 4 points, and you don't even think about it, but he's that good, right? He could get 130, like, without blinking, and that's the crazy part about this whole thing. I started with Julian. Brian, what about you? Where are we at? What's your projection for McDavid?
This is perfect timing. I got an article that'll be dropping probably tomorrow. So when everyone's reading this, it might be up there, or listening to this, you might be able to read it by then now too. I am saying he's going to hit 150. I'm confident of that. 165, I can't.
You too?
I can't even and I know, Julian, like, I know I should know better, because I was the one who like believed for most of last year. But like,
I thought you for sure would be all in.
He's got to play. The thing is too, so many things have to go right. Like, he can't miss any games. And even then, maintaining two points per game for an entire season just seems mind blowing. And I'm probably going to be sitting here talking to you guys about this time next year. We're going to be like, could he hit 200? and we'll be like, nah, there's no way. And they'll be like, remember last year when he said he couldn't have 165 and he did? So, but to your point, Jim, Draisaitl too, I think a lot of people are overlooking him. He is going to put up, his numbers at the end of this year are probably going to be as high as any second place scorer on a team has been since like maybe Yager and Lemieux.
I was going to say, did you do the research on that? Do you know what the highest scoring second place finisher is?
All time?
Yeah. I don't know the answer. I just was curious.
I believe it's Yuri Curry.
Okay.
Yeah. To a certain guy who wore number 99 way back in the day. But you were right, Jim. He could hit 130. He could hit more than 130. Dude's got 11 points in 5 games so far. He's on pace for 165 himself too. I know we're not allowed to talk about being on pace right now, but still.
No,
man.
you can. I don't like doing it so early, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's one thing if you're halfway through the season and you're like, okay, that's a long stretch of games where he's really been that
The other
good.
thing too is COVID, right? If you get COVID, especially with Canada, who knows what the restrictions and coming back and forth. But to me, if he's gonna score, like, okay, if you keep him off the score sheet one game, he's probably got 4 the next night at least.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm not worried about him maintaining that pace. Maybe a point per game would be like 160 points is one thing, but maintaining a 2-point per game pace, I don't think is out of the question.
Yeah, unless you look that he can get a 4-point night without really working too hard. So
Yeah.
he can get a 0 and a 4 and he's average out at 2, right? Like,
2, yeah.
It's who knows. Let's talk about another guy that isn't in this conversation, but he's shown that he's going to get a lot more points than maybe he ever got in the NHL. Colton, we'll start with you. Zach Hyman. I think you brought him up as one of your pluses of the season, of the 5-0 start for the Oilers so far. I'll go on a limb, and maybe you don't want to go first because I'm asking this to you and I didn't prepare you for this, but how many points do you think Hyman gets by the end of the season?
Oh man, I don't think I think if he,
because what's his high, 41?
Yeah,
I'm not sure what his career high would be.
I think it's 41.
But yeah, when they were signing him, I was hoping 50 or north of that. But I could see him putting up over 60 this year. I think just the way he started and everything, and like I said, he's just I had watched him a bit in Toronto, but I didn't realize he just impacts the game in so many different ways. So I really think obviously his goal scoring is gonna calm down a bit here, but I could see him putting up north of 60.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. And for me, we talked about this at great length. I don't know if it was this last week or the week before, about how I wasn't a huge fan of the fact that Hyman was not starting on the top line. Well, it looks like he's there now, right? Like on the road, they did that so they could line match a little bit better, and they didn't just top heavy McDavid and Draisaitl together, and it looked really good. Like Puljujärvi, Hyman, and McDavid looked really strong, and I think they're running with that now that they're back home against Philadelphia tomorrow, or tonight when people watch this. So I think Hyman has maybe shown that that's where he belongs. Julian, what do you think? Like, you've watched Hyman a lot being in Toronto, and you know how good he can be with certain players. Do you like that he's maybe going to be on this top line moving forward? I mean, obviously they'll move things around as they feel the need to, but did he show over the last couple of games that that's where he should be? Or do you think they go back at some point to the McDavid Draisaitl?
No, I've said before on this podcast previously that this is where he should be. And he's that energizer bunny on that line, and he's gonna crash, he's gonna bang, he's gonna get the puck to where people can make stuff happen, right? So, and then he's gonna go to the net and he's gonna pick up all the garbage. So, this is where he should be. And if he's playing with McDavid on that top line, I mean, 5 goals already. I think he can hit 25 on the year, which would be a career high. His career high is 21. And then 41 points is his previous career high. So I think he shatters that too. And I like the 60-point mark for him for that. Especially with the power play time, even if he's a little rotating in and out, I still think he could get a fair amount of goals on that. And yeah, he's just like I said before, I love the player. Who cares what happens down the road? He's going to contribute now. He's going to do a lot of things for you, even on the penalty kill. And he's probably going to have his best offensive year this year.
Brian, how excited are you about the idea that the positive talk surrounding Zach Hyman this early in the season is what it is? Like, we talked at great length over the summer about what this contract might look like when it wasn't a sure thing, but we figured, he might be coming to Edmonton. Everybody talked about the 7 years that they were probably going to offer and how much money it was going to be. And we all kind of said, he's going to have to produce at that contract and that good. Maybe he doesn't do it later, but out of the gate, he's looked really, really strong. How exciting is that for Oilers fans? How exciting is that for the Oilers? How exciting is that for Hyman, just to take a little bit of that weight off his shoulders to be able to produce this quickly?
Yeah, I think everyone should be really excited. I think he fits into the culture of this team, that quiet confidence, perfectly. And he's talked. There was a great interview with him, and I can't remember where I saw this in the last couple of days. It might have even just been his media avail, but he talked about he was skating with the guys right in Toronto. I think it was with Draisaitl, McDavid. Who else was down there?
Was Nurse down there? I think Nurse.
I think yeah. There were a few of them anyway, and he'd obviously these guys have just bonded. They've clicked, and I love it. And he's Energizer Bunny. I love that nickname that Julian's bestowed upon him here. That's a great way to describe him. I'll admit too, I was with Julian, you've been telling us this whole time how good he was going to be And we all, at least I know I doubted it, and Jim and Colton, I think you guys did too.
Oh, I did, yeah.
Yeah. So, and we still, this contract might still be somewhat regrettable in at the tail end of it, but right now, and that's when you need it to be, when you need him to deliver is right now. And he is just, the guy's sublime.
Yeah, the window's 4 years, right? Like that's the window. That's when Draisaitl's contract is up. That's when they have to look at all this stuff. So they need that to matter the most in the next 4 years and the next 4 seasons for Hyman. That he's starting this strong out of the gate is really, really good. I don't think that he's going to keep up the goal scoring pace that he's on right now, and that's okay. But if he can do all the other things he does, digging up pucks, dogging on the forecheck, penalty killing, like that one night he scored a shorty and a power play goal.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't think I've ever done that before. Right. And he's just so calmly subtle about the whole thing. It's like, I'm not sure I've ever done that. Like he just was really, really kind of cool about it, which makes him even more beloved by people. So it's pretty cool. We're going to take a short little breather for people watching this. It's going to be all 5 seconds. We're going to have Colin Newby from the Hockey Raiders come on. We're going to talk a little bit about the Flyers. That's the game that's going to be on tonight as you guys watch and listen to this. We're going to bring him onto the show. We're going to ask him a few questions about it, talk a little Flyers and Edmonton Oilers, and we'll see what his take is on how his team has looked and what to expect against the Flyers and Oilers. Actually, we're going to have that coming up right after the turn. Everybody, welcome back. We're going to be bringing on Colin Newby with us. He's a THW Hockey Raiders contributor covering a lot of the Philadelphia Flyers action. Colin, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jim?
Good. We wanted to bring you on because the Oilers haven't played in 4 or 5 days, and they're going to be playing the Flyers. So they've gone on a road trip. They're 5-0 this season. Did really well on the road, coming back home. They're going to be playing the Flyers. And we figured, you know what? Might as well get an outside perspective. Somebody who's going to know the Flyers much better than we probably all do. So we figured we'd bring you in to do that. And maybe we'll start a little bit with what the Flyers did this offseason. They made some major changes. They've got a new blue line. They've got a bunch of different stuff. They had is it fair to call it somewhat of an identity crisis last year? What did the Flyers do this offseason?
I think an identity crisis is probably a good way to put it. All the talk was around their chemistry, their character, things like that. And they really pounded home this idea over the offseason of getting harder to play against. I know that's one of those old school hockey cliches, but it really is what they emphasized. They want a stronger defensive game. They want toughness and grit, and they don't feel that they had that at all last year. They went out and got Ryan Ellis. He has a reputation as a solid two-way player. Rasmus Ristolainen, who has a reputation as a player who can be in your face and play with a lot of intensity. And then guys like Cam Atkinson and Keith Yandel, who have reputations as great teammates. And it was really just a way to shake up everything that they were doing, because last year was such a crazy disaster of a season with the pandemic and with the results they had, and nobody was happy with the way things went.
I'm curious. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but how's the Flyers season look so far? Has it it's early, but has it paid off a little bit? Like, has this new change in character, new change in culture, have you seen effects of this already this season? Are there signs that it's moving in the right direction?
Sure. So they played a 4-game homestand. They're 2-1-1. They scored 18 goals, which they were not thought to come into the season with goal scoring as a strength, but at least early on, that's worked out. In the second game against the Seattle Kraken, there were a couple instances, some scrums behind the net early, and then they felt Seattle had taken a few runs, Nathan Bastian in particular. It ended up Flyers defenseman Nick Seeler fought Jamie Alexiak, and then Derek Brassard, he jumped in to defend Giroux at a few points, and then Nate Thompson ended up fighting Nathan Bastian in the third period. Everybody kind of looked at that as a way that they were rallying around each other and really playing for the right reasons. And that was a nice change of pace from last year. And Claude Giroux said as much in his post-game comments, just how highly he thought of the team chemistry and the way they had each other's backs and were doing things the right way.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear, Julian.
That's good to see. Yeah, it's good to see that Broad Street, old school Broad Street mentality still intact there. But so they're sizing up the matchup against the Oilers now, right? So what do you? I know Ellis is actually. I think he's questionable to play, or is he still hurt? I'm not sure what the situation is with him.
I think he's going to be out, but I think it's still in question. But it's looking like he's out.
you see them matching up against them in terms of pairing which pair is going to play against which of the superstars?
Well, without Ellis, it would be Ivan Provorov as their top defenseman. He played last game with kind of a mix of partners in the absence of Ellis. Veteran Justin Braun is more suited for a third pair role.
Mhm.
I think they might use him on the other side of Provorov. He is not a puck mover by any stretch of the imagination, but he does play solidly in the defensive end. So I think they might have to, out of necessity, go to Justin Braun alongside Provorov to match up with that top unit. Other than that, it would be Rasmus Ristolainen and Travis Sanheim on their second pair.
Do you like them defensively, or do you like them on? Because those guys are like Ristolainen's a bigger guy, he's a little bit slower, and against like guys like McDavid, like even Braun on his own there might have a little bit of struggle. Anybody's gonna have struggles to keep up with him, but especially for guys like Braun and Ristolainen.
Sure, you took the words right out of my mouth. Anybody's gonna have trouble keeping up. So obviously that is a night where you would want Ellis, their best all-around defenseman. But I think the forward matchups with Sean Couturier do favor the Flyers. He's one of the better 200-foot centers in the NHL. So I think with Ellis being out, you might have to cover guys a little more, and that'll make it even more important to get Couturier's line out there against McDavid and Draisaitl.
What's the key, do you think, for the Flyers? Like you talked about how to try to defend McDavid and Draisaitl, and I'm sure that's what every team talks about. But is there a key? Like if you're watching the Flyers as closely as you do, are they coming in with a certain mindset? Is there a key to trying to beat the Oilers, who are at this point 5-0?
Well, I think if you look at both teams in a bubble, there's a very obvious strength for the Oilers, and there's a very obvious disadvantage for the Flyers. The Oilers have been scoring at a record-setting power play pace. Wayne Gretzky even apparently said that he thinks these Oilers are better than the 80s Oilers on the power play, which I couldn't even believe that came out of his mouth.
Well, Brian will love that. Brian loves to compare this team to the 80s Oilers.
Yeah.
Right, and the Flyers, they finished 30th on the PK in the NHL last year. That was part of the off-season turnover, especially with Cam Atkinson. He's got a good reputation as a penalty killer, and he's logged some minutes early in the season. But that's a big concern right there. You got the top power play unit versus a penalty killing unit who doesn't necessarily have their legs under them yet. They killed a few the other night against the Florida Panthers, but they had at least 7 penalties. I think it might have been 8 also. So one way to man an effective penalty kill is to stay out of the box. So that'll be another thing they have to do tomorrow.
I'm sure that's something a lot of teams say when they're playing the Oilers. Just stay. I think what was it, Dallas Eakins and the Anaheim Ducks? It's like, just don't take penalties. No penalties.
We know how
penalties.
that turned out.
That was the strategy. Didn't tend to work too well for him.
Yeah.
No, who's been the biggest surprise you think for the Flyers? Sorry, Colton.
Surprise? I don't want to sell him short, calling him a surprise, but Joel Farabee has gotten off a fast start.
That's what I thought.
He's still 21 years old, but he did lead the team in goals last year. So it depends on how you define surprise, but he's got 6 points already. And I think he's really flying in more of an all-around game. He's gotten some penalty kill minutes also, and he's really just played better in the 200-foot game than he did in his first year and a half, almost 2 years of NHL action. So I'll say Farabee.
Yeah, I was wondering about a guy like when he came into the league, it was a guy that had a lot of talk about him that could potentially win a bunch of Vezina trophies when it was all said and done, and then really struggled last year in Carter Hart. And I'm just wondering, it looks like early on he's back, and I'm just wondering, do you think that's more so like him? Is it the additions? I know last year team defense was something that was harped on quite a bit too. So do you think this Hart is back to turning into an elite goalie, or are you still kind of wait and see approach?
Well, certainly wait and see, considering it's only been 4 games. So, and he's only actually started 3 of them, so even less. But last year, I think it is fair to enter the season thinking that it was an aberration. His issues just snowballed in the worst kind of way last season. He was the worst statistical goaltender in the NHL. And as you already mentioned, the defensive system contributed. The pandemic contributed because he didn't get a lot of practice time, and he opened up in an interview after the season and said that the challenges of living alone and being a younger guy, that really got to him. So I think a clean slate really was the right way to go. And the Flyers are really crossing their fingers with that. I know you guys are familiar with him, just being an Alberta product and having played for Team Canada in world competition, but he is a high caliber goaltender. He came into the league at a younger age than most goaltenders do, and he had success right away. Now that he had some failures last year, he's actually still at a younger age than most goaltenders are when they come into the NHL. So I think the key there is patience, and he has played well through his first 3 games, but it is a wait and see approach.
Yeah, what do they always say? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So if he went downhill and went downhill hard last year, but he's able to bounce back, that will speak a lot to a young guy's character and what he can do. Brian, you want to fire off one here, Colin, while we've got him?
Yeah, I'm curious. This is a very intriguing division this year, I think. Colin, who do you expect to be? Who do you see as like legit contenders to finish first?
Well, I feel like every year we say a lot of similar things here, but you just can't look past the Islanders. We always say, oh, well, they did well in the playoffs, but are they really built for an 82-game season? Do they have the skill to do it? Or are they just kind of a lucky system type of team? Well, you can't disrespect them forever, and you have to give them credit, and you have to call them at least one of the division favorites. Another thing that's always said is about Pittsburgh and Washington having their superstars finally reach the peak. Well, they're getting up there in age, but their 2 teams are not doing poorly. The Penguins have some injuries, but they're still finding a way to do things without Malkin and Crosby. The Caps, Ovechkin's getting a little older, Oshie's getting a little older, but they're still getting it done. So that's one of those things until it actually starts to happen, these stars start to decline. You can't really say that you expect it to happen.
Okay, I got one more to finish this off here, Colin, because I know I'll be watching the game closely, hoping that the Oilers go 6-0. Who on this Flyers team am I going to be shaking my fist at and yelling at under my breath and really just to lose my mind because he's making this difficult for the Oilers to win a game and stay undefeated on the season? Is there anybody on this Flyers roster that I should actively be watching and ready to just want to just
Sure, I'll say Rasmus Ristolainen. I mentioned the whole hard to play against cliche. That is essentially the reason they brought him in. A lot of his Flyers teammates have talked about facing him in the past and how hard he is to play against. He's just a chippy player who likes to be that guy who will frustrate his opponents. He didn't have the best first game. Well, he missed the first 2 of the season and then came in against Boston last week. He did not have the best opener. He was on the ice for 2 of the goals and kind of questionable decision making. So his role on the Flyers remains to be seen. He still needs to prove himself, but I think in a game like this, it's certainly a good opportunity for him, and we'll see what he's got against some of the top tier superstars in the NHL.
So what I'm hearing you say, if I'm right, is that he could really frustrate the Oilers, or the Oilers could have a really good run against him if he doesn't show up. Is that what I'm hearing?
If you want to interpret it that way, I guess you're right.
All right. Well, we like to do this in column. Before we close the show, we'll let you be part of this. We like to do this before if our show happens to be on a game day or right before a game day, we like to predict the score of the next game. And so we're going to run the roundtable, and I'm kind of curious to see if you have the same takeaway that we do, because we are obviously biased towards the Oilers. And I don't know, I don't want to say that you're biased towards the Flyers, but it would make sense if you were. So let's run around the table. Colton, I'll start with you. What do you think the score, or what the outcome is going to be Flyers Oilers on Wednesday night?
I actually really like the Flyers team this year. I think they'll get back into the playoffs. That being said, like you said, we're biased towards the Oilers, and I already said they're going to be the last or the undefeated team for the longest. So I'll say the Oilers win 5-2 tomorrow.
Brian, what's your take on this contest? Where do you see this going?
We are going run and gun 80s style, baby. 6-5 Oilers.
Ooh, it's going to be a close one.
I'd sign up for that.
Biting their nails till the end. So Julian likes that. Are you going to pick the same score?
No, I'm going to go 5-3 Oilers, and I'll take Farabee for a goal and Yamamoto 1 goal, 1 assist.
Yamaha?
Yeah, exactly.
Colin, what about you? Are you betraying your Flyers faithful, or are you going to predict the Flyers win here?
I don't think I could ever go on a Canadian show and pick against the Flyers. So I'm going to throw the homer pick in there just to play the converse to you guys. I will align with your high scoring predictions though. I think I'll say 5-4 Flyers.
So a couple close ones. I'm going to go a little more on the Oilers heavy prediction on this one. We've yet to really see the Oilers blow anybody out. And I don't want to say this because you're on the show, Colin, and I don't want to scapegoat the Flyers and say, oh my gosh, this is the team that I assume that they just haven't swamped anybody yet. It just hasn't happened. And I know that the McDavid, Draisaitl lines played well, and Hyman's played good, and Puljujärvi's played good, but the scores haven't reflected like a blowout yet. So as much as I hate to do this to you, Colin, while you're on the show, I'm going to predict a 5-1 Oilers win. I just have a feeling that the Oilers are due for one where they just sort of spank another team. I'm hoping for your sake it's not the Flyers, but I'm kind of hoping for ours that it is. So that's where we're going to go from there. But Colin, I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for giving us a little inside perspective for the Flyers. Awesome.
Great,
and
guys.
for everybody else, for Brian, Julian, Colton, myself, this has been another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. Thanks. Have a fantastic rest of your evening. Go Oilers, go. Colin says go Flyers, go. And we'll catch you guys next week. Thanks.
Cheers.